Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. October was a great month. I wanted to talk to you about all the books I read in October. Thank you for being here. I read 12 books, one novella. I'm not really going to talk about the novella. It was 20 pages and just something to put on my Goodreads to help with my goal because my goal is not doing well. There were some pretty hefty ones. I'm getting into more fantasy, epic fantasy. This isn't my highest number I've had, but I feel like it was still a really good month. I'm opening up to more fantasy reads instead of just doing the romantasy, finding that I'm not enjoying what I used to like anymore. And so it's been just like a weird transition for me, but honestly, I'm glad it's happening. It's opening me up to books that I would have never thought to pick up. So it's been very interesting to move through this phase. I did do a lot of books I don't own physically, which is kind of weird for me because I'm usually one of those that has to have the book physically after I've finished it. But I'm trying to do better about not buying every book that I read because I don't need it. First book we finished this month was Pucking Sweet by Emily Rath. I really enjoy her Jacksonville Race series. It's basically hockey romance, contemporary romances. The first one is Pucking Around and it is a wide shoes. The second one is Pucking Wild and that is based off of a girl who's going through a divorce and she meets a younger hockey player on the Jacksonville Rays. They're all interconnecting characters. This was her third installment. She also has a couple novellas between each book. This book, I love everything about the way that Emily writes her books. The thing with writing a wide shoes for me is that I'm so scared that the writer is going to forget about limbs or what this other person's doing during this scene. And the thing is with Emily, she knows exactly where each person's body part is in that scene. Emily Rath really takes into consideration where everybody is doing something and everyone's got a purpose during that scene. And I just appreciate that whenever she writes it. This one in particular, Pucking Sweet, is about Poppy, who comes from a pretty good, well-off family. But she is the PR manager for the Jacksonville Rays. And she gets involved with some of the players. One who is as sweet as a little puppy. Second, he's got some trauma and some issues and they have to work through it. But it is a wide shoes and they're both really great dudes. Do get to find out what the next book in Emily Rath's Jacksonville Race series is going to be. I gave this one a 5 out of 5. They are pretty chunky books, but I feel like all the information that's in there is valuable and worth it to get through these big books. Mwah. I love this book. Like a little table or something just like right here to hold my books. The next one was Fantasticland by Bocoven. This is a horror. It was October. I needed to do a couple horrors. Actually hadn't seen very much talk about this book when I first grabbed it at Barnes & Noble. I just saw it on the horror table and I go, you know what? It's buy one, get one. I'll go ahead and pick this one up too. It's about a amusement park called Fantasticland in Florida. And the owner of Fantasticland wanted Fantasticland placed in a part of Florida that was close enough to see the sea, but also close enough to see trees and think that you're in the middle of nowhere. It's interesting because then a hurricane comes through and Fantasticland is in the middle of the hurricane. But they have an emergency set crew where they stay at Fantasticland to take care of the area while the hurricane's going on. Everything was supposed to be as planned until you realize they're all younger adults who are in charge of Fantasticland during this time and everything just goes awry. End up being stuck there for a month and the police end up coming and are very surprised to see that body parts are everywhere. People have been killed and they are unsure how this happened at Fantasticland, knowing that they were supposed to be set up in case they had to stay there long term and that rescue crews weren't able to get there right away after the hurricane. I did it on audio and it's set up really nicely like an interview format. Like Bocoven is the interviewer and he's interviewing each person that survived Fantasticland and hearing their side of the story. And so I do suggest if you want to pick up Fantasticland, I think it's a really great intro to horror. It is kind of gory, so just like beware going into it. But I do think this would be a really good starter just because the audio was fantastic. I had such a great experience, I think, because I did the audio. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 and I really enjoyed this story. The next book I picked up was Little Liar by Leah Rivers, this Web of Silence duet. I read Little Stranger Stranger last month. I really enjoyed Little Stranger. It's about step siblings. It's a taboo, dark romance. It's so unhinged. I liked it. Little Liar, I liked the first part of it. It was basically like kind of retelling of what happened in Little Strangers, but in a different POV. But the end, it just seemed like Leah was trying to connect too many things at the end to maybe have an idea for a next book. And I think that's really cool. But when you just start throwing things in randomly, it just didn't work for me. And I got very like, I don't understand where this is going anymore. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. I do think it's really fun if you're into it. And if you really liked Little Strangers, I think you will enjoy this. Just one of the few that got to the second part. And I was kind of just hoping for a little bit explanation on why all of a sudden everything was just okay with certain people. It was just kind of thrown together at the end, and I'm not sure how much I would have liked that. I think I needed it a little bit more clean and cut. Bespelled by Laura Thalassa. Bewitched series. The first book is Bewitched by Laura Thalassa. I enjoyed the first book. It was amazing. I gave it a 4.5 just because writing is very unserious. Just like this one, it is very unserious. It's about a girl. She's a witch. She has that amnesia trope. I actually compared it to Sanctuary of the Shadows, but Bewitched was done right, where Sanctuary of the Shadow is not done right, in my opinion. This just is going off of more that's happening while she's still trying to figure out her powers and everything. Trying to figure out her relationship with Manon. I just love him. He was great. He's one of my favorite book boyfriends at this point. I gave this one 4.5 and I just love this book. Then I did another horror book, We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kliewer. I loved this book. This book was so trippy. The ending is so many unanswered questions, and I think that's why a lot of people don't like it, because there are just so many unanswered things that are happening. If you're okay with unanswered questions, this one really creeped me out. I was sitting in my living room reading it, and I would get scared, and it was daylight. It's because the audio was so trippy. There's sounds, there's so much happening in the audios that just make it very eerie. I did it in one sitting. I gave this a 5 out of 5. Couple who buy a house, they're planning on renovating it, and then next thing you know, there's a random family knocking on the door, and the dad is like, "Hi, I used to live here. Is it okay if I show my kids around?" One of the partners is not at the house, so the other one has a really hard time saying no. So she ended up saying yes and allowed these people in. And things just kind of go like really weird from there. It was such a good time. There was always something happening in a chapter. It's creepy, eerie, everything that you would want in horror during this time. And it's becoming a movie. And I did Thrall by K.A. Riley. Cinderella dystopian romance. There's this thing called Thrall. Children are kept there until they're 19 if they have special powers. After a rebellion that had happened prior, the nobles treat them kind of like their servants and their housekeepers, cleaners, things like that, bodyguards. So when you turn 19 in Thrall, you go to a family of these noble classes and you basically live with them and hope that your life is going to be okay. Shara receives her placement in a home. She finally feels like she's found her place. There is another tethered that lives in the house with her, but he's known as like a bodyguard for the noble family. There's an instance where he offers her an opportunity to go and seduce the prince of the noble family and of the kingdom. There's just a lot of stuff that happens from there. I think it is a 4-book series. I am planning on reading the second in the series, Broken, in November, so I will hopefully let you guys know how that goes. I did give this one a 5 out of 5. There was one thing that kind of like irked me a little bit. So, I mean, if I had to think about it, I think I really did give it a 4.5 and just rounded up to a 5. But overall, this was a great read, and the cover is beautiful, and I can't wait to read Broken to see what happens. Her Favorite Jack-O-Lantern by Rebecca Rennick, about Jack and Sally. Sally is in a neighborhood where she's kind of eccentric. She loves Halloween. Her house is just the embodiment of how much she loves Halloween year round. And then we have Jack, who's coming back from the military back to his hometown where Sally lives. He ends up becoming Sally's neighbor, and he forgets that they went to high school together. Jack was very popular where Sally was like the outcast. Sally's always had a crush on Jack, and when Jack comes back into town, he's very interested in Sally. Like, he's intrigued by her. Most of the town is very much against Sally. They just think she's kind of weird and they don't really like being around her, but Jack kind of swings that around, being up with this pack to help each other out. It's a cute, cozy October romance. Rebecca Rennick does really well. I do want to pick up her next 2 books because this was just a fun time. The spice was really sweet. He was a golden retriever. It was everything I wanted in like a cozy romance. 4 out of 5. And then I read probably the weirdest book of my life. It was a horror. It was disgusting. Dead Inside by Chandler Morrison. I couldn't even find this really anywhere to buy it. It took forever on Amazon to get back in stock, so I just had to go on the e-reader and try and find it. Probably the most horrifying horror I have read. It was just disgusting. Like, I guessed the plot at the end, but even still, I thought it was really good. It was just so weird. I don't even want to explain to you how weird it is. A guy... I don't know how to explain this one to you guys without being called out for being like the weirdest person that's read it. This guy has romantic feelings towards people. He ends up meeting this girl who also has her own kind of thing that she does that's really weird, and they end up becoming friends, and it was kind of like a weird thing to read. I don't know how I feel about it to this day. It's the most gross thing I've ever read in my life, but I read it in a day and it was 160 pages. And I still thought it was pretty good, even though it was disgusting and weird. And like, that is true horror. It's gross. Take that with what you will. The first 2 in the Burning series by Evan Winter, The Rage of Dragons and The Fires of Vengeance. I actually really love these books. These were both 5 stars for me. The Rage and the Revenge and the Vengeance and the characters, and you never know what's gonna happen to all these characters. You get attached and then something crazy happens and you just get very upset. Me. These books are about how he's been wronged, okay? He's been wronged. So his answer is to become the best in the military and to get his revenge, climb the ranks of the military. Everything just kind of spirals for him. He can be so dumb, but at the same time, I get it because he's young. So much has happened to him. How is he supposed to think correctly in every situation? It was so real, the feelings he was having, and he wasn't thinking about the repercussions of what he did for anybody else. This is an African-inspired fantasy. I loved it. The magic system was so unique, and I'm so excited to get into the next one, hopefully next year sometime. It is going to be a 4-book series. When I picked this up, I thought it was just these 2, and I was like, oh my gosh, too easy. That will be my first step into epic fantasy. And boy, was I wrong, because there are 4, okay? Well written, the action, everything put into this book was so good. I can see where it dragged a little bit. He's going through training a lot of the first book. I think the second book is probably my favorite out of the 2, just because more things are just happening politically in this book compared to this one. For this to be a debut novel for Evan Winter, fantastic. I have decided to go on my Brandon Sanderson journey with Mistborn. I am doing the reading order, Mistborn Era 1. I really enjoyed it. I'm in the middle of the Well of Ascension right now. I've never read something like this before, and the characters are so in-depth. It's got what you would want in the epic fantasy, like trying to break the cycle. It's the basic higher power, and you want to get rid of that higher power, and so you essentially create this heist to overthrow this higher power. Everything about this book was just perfection to me. And I'm so glad I decided to finally freaking do Brandon Sanderson, because it was about dang time. I'm actually really happy to be going into like epic fantasy, because it just hits so well when it hits. The connection I feel with these characters is just so different than anything I've ever felt before. This was a freaking 5 out of 5. I freaking love this book and I'm so excited to keep going. Like, I'm trying to do the Cosmere, I'm trying to do that reading order, and I hope to let you guys know that it's brilliant. The Blue Book of Nebo by Manon, Steffan, Ross is very short. It's 160 pages. It is a dystopian based off of the what if of a nuclear explosion, going back and forth between a mother and a son. She's talking about the before, he's talking about the after effects of the nuclear explosion. Basically going over the simplicity of life after it's been destroyed. Not worrying about cell phones, jobs, anything other than just the means to survive. So growing, food, going back to simplicity, essentially. Some people do better with simplicity than everything that's going around in the world right now. 4 out of 5. It's 160 pages, one sitting read. I really loved it. And then I read Quicksilver by Callie, Hart, and I am going to say it. I have beef with this book. It dragged for the first like 200 pages until I got to chapter 20, and then I really thought there was going to be a turnaround process at chapter 20, and there was, and I really enjoyed it up until the last 100 pages. Callie Hart threw so much into those last 100 pages, I just got very confused. And it was almost kind of like she wanted to put in a shock factor like everybody else who's been able to pull it off. Cough, cough, how does it feel? I think that's why she did it, was because she wanted that shock value, but she didn't want just one shock value. She wanted like 10 shock values. And for that, to me, it was a little too much and it got very confusing. And then to like not even tie up the loose ends, like I get it, you're setting up for book 2, but you've already put so much into book 1. What are you going to use for the shock value of book 2 if you're creating a series? And it kind of just made me feel really stupid reading it. And I get it because the layout's there for Romantasy. You have your dark, broody MMC. The banter was good. He was actually really good. Like, I really liked Kingfisher, but just the execution at the end just didn't hit for me. But the spice scenes were really good, and I did really like some of the lines. It's just, it was a no for me, so I gave this one a 2.5. Staying around and watching my October reading wrap up. I do think I had a pretty decent month considering. I think what really killed it for me was just ending the month with Quicksilver, hoping for that really big high anticipation read that everybody loves. So I thought I would be able to be a part of the club with that one. So I think I'm just a little upset ending the month with that. But other than that, I think I had a pretty good month and I'm looking forward to November. I have some pretty good ideas on what I'm planning to do. Definitely going to keep going into Mistborn for November and then hopefully keep going from there. I have some other ideas, so we'll see what happens with it. But 12 books and a novella that I don't want to talk about. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked, comment, subscribed, it'd be great. And then send me some recs. I'm all down for it. Okay, thanks, bye.